finally a Michael Schenker album we can be excited about. Hi, welcome back to Classic Guitar Rock. I'm Jeremy, and I want to talk about the brand new Michael Schenker Group album, Immortal, which was just released on January 29th. If you've watched many of my videos, I've mentioned several times how much I love Michael Schenker. He is probably my favorite guitar player of all time. I just love Michael Schenker. But at the same time, he's one of the most frustrating players of all time too. He's, I think, what you call mercurial, right? I don't think he's necessarily an easy guy to work with. Not that he's a bad guy. I just think that he's a creative guy. He's an artist. He doesn't always do things the smart way. He follows his own drum beat, if that makes sense. But I was very excited to hear the new album. This is the first MSG album since 2008. Now he's had several releases over the last few years under the name, Michael Schenker Fest, Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock. So he's been releasing stuff every year or so for the last decade. But and that stuff hasn't been bad. In fact, Michael over the last decade has really kind of turned around and playing wise is doing really well. And it seems like his personal life is kind of in a better place than it was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. In the early 2000s, if you see any videos of him performing live, he was not in the best condition physically. Again, he's kind of a private, secretive person, but I think there was probably some alcohol issues going on, maybe some substance abuse going on. I don't know all the details, but he has turned over a new leaf in the last 10 years or so, which is awesome because he still puts out great stuff. So the good news and the bad news about this album. Let's talk about the good stuff first. First of all, it's a great album. Michael's playing is stellar, just really good. So from that standpoint, it's great. There are a number of really solid songs on this album. In fact, there's not a bad song on it. There's not a bad song on the album. When you listen to some albums and you can tell, well, this is obviously filler. They need to come up with another 4 minutes. None of that on this. Every song is good. It's produced by Michael and his longtime writing partner, Michael Voss, who also helped produce. And you hear a lot of throwbacks to the early MSG, the stuff in the 80s, which I think is cool. In fact, there's one song on this album called The Queen of Thorns and Roses that sounds like it's literally from 1984. In fact, when you listen to this song, you know what I think of? When you put it's Michael Voss on vocals. When you hear the vocals, you hear the music. To me, it sounds like Honeymoon Suite, right? Something from some melodic rock from the 80s. Catchy tune, good song. And that's just one example of kind of these throwbacks from earlier MSG stuff. In fact, that song sounds more 80s than any Schenker song from the 80s, right? It just kind of has that real 80s vibe. But that kind of brings me to one of the points I want to make and one of the negatives. Now, again, the music is solid. The songs are great. The performances are all great. But this is the problem that Schenker has always had. He has never had, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm right when I say this, he has never had 2 consecutive albums with the same personnel. Never. From the very beginning of the Michael Schenker group in 1979, he has never had 2 albums with the same personnel. So this is a consistent thing with Michael over the years, revolving door of personnel. And what that means is, yeah, you can get individual great performances, and even an album here or there. I mean, usually on his albums, he doesn't even have the same personnel from song to song, which is very frustrating. It's hard to get an identity when you are continually changing the folks in your band, especially lead singers, right? And so that's continually plagued Michael. Now, on this album, as good as it is, we have, gosh, 5 or 6 lead singers. Okay, so think about that. We've got, and I'll talk about some of these singers as we go through here, but at least 5 or 6 singers. We've got 3 different drummers. We've got 2 keyboard players. The only thing consistent is Michael and the same bass player, Barry Sparks, throughout. Okay, everything else, revolving door. And again, that's not to say you won't get some good stuff, but in terms of longevity, this is something that has plagued the Michael Schenker group. You got different singers. It sounds like a different band. You know, every time you hear them, there's just no consistency. So I found it was kind of ironic that he decided to call this album the Michael Schenker group, when in fact it's really no different than the last 2 albums he's done with Michael Schenker Fest, and then previous to that, Temple of Rock. They're all the same revolving doors of musicians. Again, not to say that that makes it bad, other than from a marketing standpoint, from a longevity standpoint. Man, you understand why Michael hasn't had the success that he deserves over the years. There's no dependability, no consistency. And so that makes it kind of tough for sure. So let's talk about some of the performances on this album. So in the lead singing department, we've got Ronnie Romero. Let me talk about Ronnie Romero for a minute. He's from Chile. He is a great singer. Okay, imagine he looks kind of like a cross between Freddie Mercury and Jeff Goldblum. And he sings like Ronnie Dio. This is the guy that Blackmore tapped a few years ago when he did his Rainbow reunion. The guy's awesome. He's kind of a hired gun at this point. He just did the Vandenberg album. He's with the project called Lords of Black. He obviously did the Rainbow thing, and he's involved with a few other projects. But the guy is solid, really good. Now, for my money, I would have loved to hear an entire album, MSG album, with Ronnie Romero. The guy's awesome. We've also got Joe Lynn Turner of Rainbow fame. I'm a huge Joe Lynn Turner fan. I think he's terribly underrated. I think he's awesome. He sings 2 songs on the album, does a great job. And then we've got Ralph Sheepers, who I'm not as familiar with. He sings 2 or 3 songs. He's solid. I mean, he's a solid kind of metal singer. In fact, the songs that he sings kind of have a Judas Priest feel. The first song, Drilled to Kill, and then a song called Night of the Dead. No, Devil's Daughter. Okay, so Drilled to Kill and Devil's Daughter, kind of similar songs. They sound like they could be off of Screaming for Vengeance or Defenders of the Faith. You know, really, really fast double bass songs. The verses especially sound like Priest. The choruses, at least on Drilled to Kill, the first song, the choruses sound like a Graham Bonnet part. You know, that sounds like Graham Bonnet could be singing this song. Both solid songs. He's a solid performer. But those are your 3. Oh, and then there's also contributions by Doogie White and Robin McCauley. I think that's what I read, but I can't tell you where those are on the album, to be honest. And then Gary Barden sings part of a song. So we're up to 6 singers on this album, right? 3 primary lead singers. Ronnie Romero, I think, does 3 tracks. Then they're split between Joe Lynn Turner, Ralph Sheepers, and Michael Voss does a couple. So right there, guys, that's problematic, having that many lead singers, I think. Not that any of them are bad. I would just rather it sound like a band and you got 1 singer. Let's get Ronnie to do all of these, whatever. Okay, just my thoughts. Three drummers, three excellent drummers. Simon Phillips is on here. Brian Tichy's on here. And then a guy, again, I must be German because they recorded much of this in Germany. Bodo Schaff is the third drummer. Again, the drumming is great. A lot of double bass stuff going on, which I've kind of been critical of that in the past. This, not annoyingly so. There's enough space and enough mixing up of tempo and things that it doesn't drive me crazy. But so many of these albums that are just constant double bass all the way through just gets tedious after a while. But they mix it up enough that you don't come away from this feeling that way. On keyboards, we've got Steve Mann, who's been with Schenker for the last two Michael Schenker Fest albums, I believe. He's keyboards and rhythm guitar. When you go see him live, this is the long blonde-haired guy who plays keys and rhythm guitar. He's on here. And then we've got an appearance by Derek Sherinian, who was in Dream Theater, Black Country Communion. He's played with lots of folks over the years. He's on that first number, Drilled to Kill, with a killer John Lord sounding keyboard solo and some great, unison playing that he does with Schenker. And it's good. Guys, the whole album's really good. The whole album's great. So I want you to go buy it for sure. These are just some things that are kind of frustrating about Michael, this revolving cast of characters. I wish he could land on a solid band and stick with it for a while. So, high points. Let me share with you my favorite songs. I'll just kind of walk through each one. Drilled to Kill, the lead-off single video that I saw was Drilled to Kill. And right out of the gate, I wasn't wild about this dumb chant, we're drilled to kill. We're drilled to kill. It starts out with that. It just sounds stupid. Once you get past that and the song starts, it's a good song. Great song. Anti-war song. Michael's a big anti-war guy. I don't know if you've followed a lot of the subject matter on his Temple of Rock stuff, and he is an anti-war guy. Understandably, grew up in Germany. Okay. This has an anti-war message. Great song. Again, verses remind me of Judas Priest. Choruses remind me of Graham Bonnet. Good song. Don't Die on Me Now, Joe Lynn Turner. Solid song. Hooks throughout, guys. Hooks throughout. Great choruses. Michael Voss, I've noticed that since Schenker and Michael Voss have worked together, the songcraft is pretty good. They've got a number of songs that are catchy in a different time period. These could definitely have been hit songs, right? Night of the Dead. I think that's the first Ronnie Romero song. Don't hold me to that. Solid song. Song number 4 is called After the Rain. This is kind of, if you want to say there's a ballad, I wouldn't call it a ballad. I'll call it a ballad. It's kind of mid-tempo. It's not really slow, but it's ballady. Again, kind of an 80s sound. This is Michael Voss on vocals. Good song. Devil's Daughter. Another heavy song. That reminds me a lot of Drilled to Kill. Same singer on that one. That was Ralph Sheepers on that. Again, kind of priesty in the chorus or in the verses. Good song. I think my favorite song on the track, this is Ronnie Romero on vocals, is Sail the Darkness. Very Holy Diver sounding, very Ronnie Dio sounding. Great song. Track 7, The Queen of Thorns and Roses. This is the one I talked about that reminded me of Honeymoon Suite from the 80s. Catchy song, lots of hooks. The guitar playing is very good, even though it sounds like a very much an 80s pop song. Good song. Come On Over, another Ronnie Romero song. Solid. Great vocal performance, great guitars, just a great song. Then we got one, kind of a spaghetti western sounding tune. This is Joe Lynn Turner on vocals. It's called Sangria Morte. Kind of a, like I said, spaghetti western, kind of a Spanish feel to it. Good song. And then here's what's interesting. Last song on the album, If you guys go way back to Lonesome Crow, the first Scorpions album, you'll recognize this song. It's a re-recording, a reproduction of In Search of the Peace of Mind, which is the first song Schenker wrote when he was 15 years old. He said he wrote it in his mom's kitchen. And it's on that first Scorpions album. And they redo it here. Here you hear Gary Barden in the beginning. He sings the mellow part at the beginning. Then it transitions into Ronnie Romero. Now, I'm not sure, but maybe Doogie White makes an appearance on this. Maybe Robin McCauley makes an appearance. Because I read somewhere that they're on this album too, but I can't tell you where, to be honest. But it's fairly true to the original version. A few things they've changed up, but it's a good song too. All the way through, solid album. I'm super excited. I much prefer this to the previous Schenker Fest albums. They weren't bad. This is much better. I much prefer this to the Temple of Rock stuff from even a few years back. They weren't bad. This is much better. Now, why he decided to call this MSG, I don't know. Because in terms of the way it's made, the revolving doors, it's no different than Temple of Rock or Michael Schenker Fest. But in terms of quality, this is the best album from Schenker. I've seen other reviews that say this, and I agree. This is the best album the Michael Schenker group has put out since Assault Attack in 1982. I really believe that. Now, I would like it better if it were an actual band instead of an ensemble cast that we see. But in terms of a great album, it's a great album. So I would head right out and buy it and listen to it and enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Guys, thanks for your support on the podcast. And please check out the podcast and follow it if you haven't had a chance to do that. Our next episode on the podcast, we will actually be reviewing the classic UFO album featuring a 16 or no, I think he's 18 years old, featuring an 18-year-old Michael Schenker on the UFO album Phenomenon. So check that out. That'll be coming out this week. And also, you can become a patron. You can follow us at our Patreon site, and you can become a patron at as little as $3 a month. So if you're in something you're interested in, check us out on Patreon. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Classic Guitar Rock. Bye-bye.